they've come from. Probably around here somewhere. Thank you so much. I'm Helen. I'm an alcoholic. My home group is the 100,000 Head Mile Checkup group in King's Cross in Sydney. We're right across from the police station, so just to familiarise you and orient you, because I'm sure many of you know that spot. I'm very, very grateful to be here in more ways than I can possibly even say from this podium. But when I arrived last night under cover of darkness, which is how I like to arrive, I just like to slide in under cover of darkness, I could just see how much effort and service had gone into the organisation of an event like this, with camping, with the accommodation, the army of catering, you know, all these people doing service. It's incredible, you know, love and service, they're the two things that that everything boils down to, and it was just wonderful to see. So thank you so much. And I walked into this room last night and just something came over me. It was really special, and you know, I had a little bit of a illness recently that I was so wrapped up in self, and I needed to get something out. I needed to write something out. I needed to send that to my sponsor and speak to her. And all I'll say is that the person who's standing at this podium today and the person who walked into the room last night are two different people, which is what happens when God gets involved in our lives. And I knew I was going to cry, and I make no apology for it, because the shifts that happen in us, in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was wonderful in the last meeting to hear amends being made and to see healing happening in families. I'll get there in a minute. You're going to hear some of that from me today, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. So I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 21 years old. I thought I was too cool, too female to do the steps, too young to do the steps. I thought, you guys, you know, I heard your stories, you know, of hurt children and ruined marriages and lost jobs. And I was 21, and I just thought I hadn't really harmed anyone very much. And so I set about getting Start Craving Sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, doing service, picking up some of your slogans. I mean, I know how to sound good. And I loved what Tony said in the last session, where he talked about an act. You know, it was all an act. I knew it was a fraud. And that's the bondage of self. And I had to unpick that. An adult child of an alcoholic, and my father was about 5 years sober when I got sick. And my dad's rock bottom was, I'll tell you a little bit of his story. My dad was a binge drinker. I didn't really see much of his drinking growing up. Like, I don't remember seeing him drunk a lot, but I just remember a lot of tension in the family home. He hid his drinking. My mum was very angry a lot, and you know, really, really caught up. She had a father who was an alcoholic, which I didn't discover from her, a husband who was an alcoholic, and a daughter then who was an alcoholic. So she got a lot of stuff she's carrying, and my dad lost his license one more time, and he decided that was it. It was too much shame, and he was going to take himself out. And he got arrested for the drink driving, taken to hospital, checked himself out of the hospital, took an overdose of Panadol, lay down on some train tracks, got hit by a train, got spat out from between the wheels of the train, and was airlifted to hospital and somehow miraculously survived. And I remember looking at him in the hospital and seeing his head, which was about the size of a basketball. And they had in the pocket of his suit, they had found a letter that I'd written to him when I was really pissed off with him one day. He hadn't shown up to some play I was in or recital I was on, and I really, really wanted him to be there, and he hadn't shown up. And I'd written him a letter to tell him how upset I was with him. And in the breast pocket of his jacket that they had cut off him, you know, when you see the scissors up the nice suit that Tony was wearing earlier, you know, it all looks lovely on the outside, but it does, they all come off the same way. Trousers snip, snip, snip up the legs. And I saw that in his pocket, and I thought that I had caused it, you know. So there's a lot of healing to do. And And I remember looking at my dad and I promise to get through this stuff and stop crying. I promise. This is going to get good, I promise. And I remember looking at my dad in the hospital and saying to myself, I am not going to be like you. I am not going to be. And I tried. I set about from then on, from 15 years old, I tried to be as different as I could to Dad. If he was sitting down watching TV, I'd be standing up running around. Like I just tried to be the opposite of him. I don't know. I didn't 100% really know what an alcoholic was. Didn't really get that, but I just knew it wasn't good to be him, and we were like each other. I knew we were like each other. I knew we were very similar. I was afraid. I mean, I don't know what that is, but I just knew I was afraid. And my mum used to say to me, oh, you're just like your father. When she was upset or angry with me for being a lazy teenager or whatever, she'd go, oh, you're just like your father. And when I was in the throes of alcoholism, wondering how to get out of it, trying to pick methods of suicide that didn't look like suicide because my dad had suicided, that was the thing that repeated in my head. You're an alcoholic. You're just like your father. You're an alcoholic. You're just like your father. And so he came to Alcoholics Anonymous via a treatment centre. He was wheeled in. He was pretty bad way, and he was just wheeled in, so he had no choice. But something started to happen to him, and he came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and they called him Dave the Train. If we don't have a sense of humour in Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know why. He's still called Dave the Train. And now, much to his disgust, he's now called Dave, Helen's dad. That's what happens when you come in and you've got family members in Alcoholics Anonymous. But my rock bottom into Alcoholics Anonymous was not the flashing lights and my pitiful and incomprehensible demoralisation. It was not flashing lights. It wasn't arrests. It wasn't, that had happened, but that's not what, it wasn't an axe in the back of the head. I don't know, Keenan's around. It was that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralisation for me was the fact that I couldn't trust myself. I couldn't keep my word. I wanted badly to meet you at that place and be there and show up for life. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't make promises. I couldn't commit to anything. And I desperately, desperately wanted to. And so that was really at the end of it, that's when I came in. And so you came to Alcoholics Anonymous, decided that you guys definitely needed the steps. But I was going to sit on the bench there and just learn the slogans and sound okay. And a boyfriend of mine who was with me when I was drinking, the last sort of 6 months of my drinking, the first 6 months of recovery, which is, was a blur. We'd stayed in touch, and from time to time we'd catch up on the phone. And one day he called me up, and it was a bit out of the blue, and he said, I've met someone. And I said, oh, that's great. I was pleased for him, sort of. Wanted him to sort of be grieving me forever, but, and he said, I don't know if it's appropriate that I call you anymore. And I was like, that's a bit funny. All right, whatever. And then he went on to say, I don't think you have any idea of what you did and how you were and what it did to me. And he was so right. I had gone skipping along the road of happy destiny, just keep coming back. I had meetings-based recovery, I had no program, and I was starting to get really scratchy and thirsty in Alcoholics Anonymous. And pretty much within a week or so, I'd seen this woman around, thought I liked how she sounded, and I asked her to be my sponsor. And she said, she's German, she said, sure, come on, Saturday morning, 10 a.m, bring your big book. And I thought, whoa, that sounds like a lot of commitment. All right, then. Whew, she's a bit staunch about these things. God, I was very loosey-goosey. I can still be very loosey-goosey. And so I began. And, we've heard from Chris and Mandy yesterday on step 1, and Colleen and Rob and Tony today, and we've walked through the steps to this point. And all I'm going to say about that is they're a lot weller than I am, okay? So, and so we got to steps 8 and 9, made a list of all the persons we'd harmed. It says in the big book, faith without works is dead. In 8 and 9, at this point, we're in the big leagues now. They're sending us out amongst the general population, unaccompanied, No, we are accompanied. We're accompanied by God, and we're accompanied by good sponsorship if this is going to work out, And So and it was funny when I went through my step 4 and 5. The things that I was ashamed of that I had done with drinking. Chris talked about it beautifully yesterday when he talked about, it wasn't the bashed up vehicles, it wasn't the arrests, it wasn't the carnage that was the stuff that was really painful and shameful in my step 4. One of my things and I went to make amends for this, was a girlfriend of mine had told me that she was pregnant and that she'd lost a baby. And I used information and gossip as currency in a transaction to win your approval. And I told people, she had told me that in the strictest of confidence and was a good friend. And I had told other people. Those things were the shameful things that I did that went against my moral code. And those are the things that I found really hard when I needed to make a list of the people that I'd harmed and become willing to make amends. It says in the family afterwards, cessation from drinking is but the first step away from a highly strained or abnormal condition. It says we grow by our willingness to face and rectify errors and convert them to assets. The alcoholic's past thus becomes the principal asset of the family, and frequently it's almost the only one. This painful past may be of infinite value to other families still struggling with their problem. And when I was around 15 or 16, the first time I was experiencing an amend was my father making amends to me. I knew this was going to come back at any point. It was going to be now. And I don't remember the words we said. We were in his garage, surrounded by the half-filled cans of paint and the drills. And the garage in my dad's house is a spiritual place. And I don't remember the words that he said, but I remember that something changed profoundly. I was released from the guilt that I had caused his suicide, because we'd never talked about it up until that point. And so I was released from that. He told me that wasn't true. We believe things. We pick up things and they stay in our heads. We believe them until we examine them. And that was the first time that I'd had a spiritual conversation, two spirits talking to each other in my dad's garage. and a healing just began to take place. Sorry. And that person that I'd had on a pedestal my whole life was back on a pedestal again. And that was great. That was lovely. But I just said about then, that was when my journey into alcoholism began. And when it was time for me to make my amends to my father. First of all, when I went through the amends, I was doing the deluded thing where I thought that I had been absent from my family when I was drinking. I was away, I was in a different area. So I deluded myself that there was no harm caused there. And it was pointed out to me that, an absence or a withdrawal of love is pain. And I caused pain to my parents. My mum used to joke and say, oh, we knew if you were in trouble because you'd call. I wouldn't call my parents. I was 18 years old. I wouldn't call my parents for months. I just disappeared. I was off having fun. I didn't need them. I had need space. I would talk to you if I needed you. And if I needed something from you, you wouldn't not hear from me, let me assure you. We'd be best buddies. I was wrapped up in the bondage of self, chasing people, places and things to fix the problem on the inside that could never be solved by that. And so when I got sober, consistently showing up, calling my parents, asking them how they are, asking them if they need anything, paying back the money, all of those things were the steps I needed to take. And I didn't, I almost once I had written out my harms list, which we get from step 4 and 5, and the first time I did it, I probably was a little woolly and loose. But the second time I did it, I did a bit more, a thorough sort of step 3 column. We ran through step 3 in the the areas of self. And then my mistakes, my harms, where my thinking is wrong. I looked through all of that. And when I went to make my amends, it was very clear. It was selfish and inconsiderate of me not to call you and be in touch with you. And then the contrary action, which is I show up, I'm present, I'm a daughter to my parents, you know. That's you know, what's occurred since. And so, but I went to make amends to my father, and I stood in the garage, and he was so proud. It's so beautiful to receive an amends, not because if you know, and I've done the steps and receive an amend, you know that the connection is restored, you know. This isn't about, there's definitely some I'm like, I really can't wait till this amends because I'm still not well. But you know that God has done, God has got an end there, and God is healing something that cannot be healed by anything else, because I'm wrapped up in self. I don't want to do this. Why on earth would you do this? Step 9 says, we may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And the chap that had actually, you know, propelled me to doing the steps, my ex-boyfriend, he had asked me not to contact him. In that phone call, which was the launch pad to me actually going to ask someone to sponsor me, he'd asked me not to call him. So I wrote my amends on a piece of paper and I gave it to God. And if I had made my amends at that time to that person, it would have been full of all kinds of wrong motives. There's a bit in our tradition, in the 12 and 12, which says, good judgment, a careful sense of timing, courage and prudence are the qualities we shall need when we take step 9. Now, if any of you were here when Tony was speaking, you will know that good judgment, a careful sense of timing, courage and prudence are not qualities I possess in and of myself. This cannot be done alone, and you know, I've done my amends a few times, and always with the sponsor who heard the 4 and the 5, who was constantly in there weaving, finding out which were the bits I was skirting over and which were the bits that I was labouring the point, because we've all got those, and knows better than me where my slipperiness is. And the second time that I did my step 8 list, I actually then just wrote out from my step 5 list. I wrote out, you know, what the amend was, because I need the right words to say. I'll go in there full of self and manipulation because I want an outcome. I want you to like me, or I want forgiveness, or I want, you know, I'm full of self. So I needed the right words to say, and I needed to pray before I went to make my amends. And it was, you know, just that. It was selfish and inconsiderate of me to not call, to not be around, to exclude myself from the family. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. We attempted to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. And what happens when I run the show myself is that I begin to chase people, places and things. My favourite thing is being an accomplished person who you like and respect, being not a worker amongst workers. No, thank you. I want to be at the top of the org chart, very top. And somebody in the last speech session was just talking about wanting, being the rule breaker. Which rules? None of the rules apply to me. I want to be at the top of the org chart because I want to change all the rules to my liking. I don't like following rules. They're there for good reason, for good governance. Well, yeah, maybe, but there's always a but, isn't there? When you go to a national park, there's usually a sign that says, leave nothing but, footprints and take nothing but memories, that sort of thing. And they say clearly, don't take rocks, don't take this, don't take that. I'm a geologist by trade. And I always think it's absolutely fine to take a sample of rock. The rules don't apply. But it says, don't do that, Helen. I always think it's absolutely fine. The rules don't apply. And continuing to stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm someone with very poor wheel alignment. I veer off the path regularly. And I need a lot of course correction regularly. And when I don't, I end up in a ditch. And there may be people and passengers in the car with me, And so I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 21, so I'm 23 years sober now. I've lived more of my life in this fellowship, practicing the steps intermittently, sometimes well, sometimes, amazingly well. Give myself an A star. And sometimes not at all. And the thing that happens to me when I don't practice this program is I become totally wrapped up in self. And I can see, it's like I can see the world outside me. I can see, yesterday morning I woke up and I saw a beautiful pink lake. It's like I can see it, I can describe it, but I can't feel it in here because the bondage of self keeps me blocked off. I mean, I could be sitting at a table with Bill Wilson and Bob and there would just be yam, 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 because I can't hear it and I can't connect with it, and that is heartbreaking when you've got time sober and this isn't right, something's not right, then there's a problem. And I fall asleep. I've fallen asleep and sleepwalked in AA. And it's excruciatingly painful. And but I've had my moments of revelation as well. And so there's anyone here today who's been veering, hasn't done the steps, did the steps 20 years ago, but feels there's something missing, and you hear somebody say something that appeals to you, go and speak to them. Begin the process. We can God is just sitting there waiting, going, oh, this one's going to be fun. Oh. He's just waiting. He's just waiting for us. There's no punishment. It's just resume to the path. Carry on. We just want to see you well. And there are beautiful people in this program who just want to see us, welcome us back. So if you've been out or you've been in but out, please rejoin, And when I was asked to share, I was really worried. I was thinking, oh my goodness, lots of my friends and who've got these fantastic stories and these amazing and dramatic amends. I thought, oh God, I don't stack up to those, And then I remembered, my father's story and my story of amends back to him, and how as a family we reconnected. And I'm married, and I have 2 children. They're 9 and 11. And so I became a parent in Alcoholics Anonymous, sober. And last year we got to spend 4 weeks on the road together, my dad, me and our 2 kids. We went on this fantastic road trip, and we went up through the middle from Adelaide to Darwin. And when I think of an experience like that, I think of the sliding door moment. Had my dad been killed by his own hand, had he not survived that, had he not got sober in AA, had he not made amends, had I not got sober in AA, had I not made amends, had I not been a sober mum, had I not been able to give, the reason that we went on a big road trip is my dad joined a tag-along one year. Somebody was just talking about a tag-along in the last meeting from Lightning Ridge. My dad joined along with a tag-along one year and made a whole bunch of sober friends throughout the outback. So on this trip up through the middle, we stayed with alcoholics and had a ball. My kids' favourite memories were in Cooper Pedy with a guy from AA out in the back of his yard learning to dig holes with a digger. 9/11, what a great time that is, So had all of these things not happened, the life I have today is absolutely God-given. And I know everyone in this room has had those moments where you stand back and you realise it's just for today, and it's a very fickle thing, and by my own hand I can bring it down with a wrecking ball. I don't need to fear the stuff out there. The stuff in here is the stuff that's going to cause me the damage. When I'm with God, I can face the stuff out there. If I make mistakes and I'm humble enough to admit it and do the work and make the amends, I can rejoin the human race. I can veer off the path and rejoin the human race. But I'm the only one who's really going to be the author of my own destiny, or my own demise. And so, how am I going for time? 20 minutes. Wow. You might have an early mark today, that's what I'm going to say. When I looked up the definition of harm, it says harm includes physical, emotional or spiritual damage. I was listening to Tim Morgan recently, and he said it's also about stealing time, wasting people's time and effort. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's a good one. And I remember I was working at this company, and I still work there. They still employ me, and I was trying to be. I wasn't interested in doing the work. I was interested in making myself comfortable in my workplace. Okay, and that meant I needed to be everyone's friend, have everyone like me. So, and that ate a little bit into my work time. We had to talk about what was playing, what was on TV. I had to impress them, and there was one or two girls in that I really did not impress, and they did not want to be my friend, and they excluded me, and I had to do a lot of inventory. It was very embarrassing to feel like I was the one who was being left out at lunchtime, I was really humiliated, which made me try even harder, of course. I doubled down on my defects at that point, Gossip was part of that, And when I sat down with my sponsor and did my inventory on it, I looked at all of the excruciatingly painful things that I'd done, and she was like, well, you just can't do those anymore, it's contrary action. She goes, you need to go and do 8 hours work for 8 hours pay. Fundamental. Fairly easy. If you're trying to get more than 8 hours work for 8 hours pay out of your job, then there's self involved. I thought, that's a bit unusual. I was stealing time from my company. I was wasting time, because I wanted to be liked. And so I had no choice. They left me out at lunch. I had no friends to gossip with and play with, so I had no choice but to work hard, just sit down and apply myself and do the job they were paying me to do. God forbid, whoever thought of doing that? And, lo and behold, what happened, Someone went, she's doing a good job. You see, I wanted to get recognised and noticed. And I thought that happened by sidling up to people with power, getting them to be my best friend, impressing and influencing them. And turns out they just wanted me to do my job. And phenomenal. And, so the next quarter I got promoted. It was ridiculous. But that really taught me something. It really taught me to look at the way I was operating in the world and how I was being amongst other people. It was embarrassing to look back at it. And then I had to go and make amends to this one girl. She was probably one of the only times I've really had to make friends with an enemy. And it was a very awkward. I wrote that thing out word for word. I got the words to say to that girl because I did not know how I was going to make that amends otherwise. And I went to her, and it was very awkward, but I was free. And the thing about what Tony talked about 6 and 7 and going and having the quiet hour. And after I did my 4 and 5, I sat down with my sponsor, and she said, go home. I think I honestly managed about 45 minutes of the hour, if I'm being honest. And at the end of the 45 minutes, I stood up. I'd always played musical instruments, but since alcohol had, gone its way, I hadn't touched a musical instrument for probably about 4 or 5 years. And and after the 45 minutes, I'm going to be rigorously honest, I stood up, and it was like, honestly, if a tractor beam and an alien spaceship had been over the house, I wouldn't have been surprised. This feeling came all the way down me, over me, and came back up, and I knew that everything was going to be okay. I got a sense of ease and comfort, the one that I had been chasing all that time from alcohol. And after I did my amends, you see, before that point, and every way up until that point, I was dragged in here, and I felt very apart from the human race. I felt those people all out there. I remember walking down the street, and I couldn't look people in the eye, and I thought if people caught my eye, they were going to see me and see how rotten I was inside and judge me. And so I stayed in the house, because I just felt so uncomfortable walking down the street with, I was living in London at the time, people walk past the street, you'd be dead on the street, and no one would ever walk past you, It's chronically self-centered, just a little bit. So I go from being completely paranoid that the rest of the world thinks I'm a piece of shit and terrible, to sort of being able to act better, my act cleaned up pretty quickly. I got sober, I got a job, I could afford to buy clothes, so I bought nice ones, cleaned up the outside, bought a sports car, so I cleaned up the outside stuff. But I didn't feel level or like there were equal signs between me and everyone else on the planet. I heard people say that. I was like, that's bullshit. And I didn't feel like that. I still felt less than. I still felt like I was a bit of a dirty alcoholic, and that I had a secret to hide and a secret to keep. And when I went and did my amends, there was a freedom from that. I just felt that I could stand shoulder to shoulder with my fellow and have an honest conversation and not feel less than. I felt chronically less than. And after I did 8 and 9, that feeling went away. There's on page 77 it says, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Our real purpose is that. I didn't know that, and I still forget that all the time. The worldly clamours are very attractive to this alcoholic, and I chase money, and I've chased prestige, I've chased people to try and fix that sense of self. But it doesn't work. And that's been proved to me a number of times, and I've been humbled a number of times. So going into each day, understanding that my real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service. The point is to cut away the bits that are standing in the way of me, my usefulness and effectiveness to God and to the people around me. Well, who are the people who I interface with first in my day? My children. My children are the first up, and I can tell my spiritual condition when I hear the pitter-patter. They're not very tiny anymore, they're 9 and 11. They used to be the pitter-patter of tiny feet on a wooden floor. And if I went, oh, then I needed to pray immediately. But if I was, and sometimes regularly it was like that. But if I was filled with gratitude for these little pitty-patted tiny feet from a sober mum who was raising them, or trying to, and I felt grateful for that. I knew God had me for a moment, but I need to get close to God as quickly as possible. So when it's oh God, it's quick God, help, I need you. Yes, dear. Get into bed, let's have a cuddle. And I talked a little bit before about stealing time. And what happens to me when I start chasing the worldly clamours, when I start working late because I'm trying to impress, I'm trying to get something done. If I win this next proposal, if we bring in $1 million, multi-million-dollar job, they'll like me, they'll think I'm great. My name will be mentioned. I like that. And so if I stay late at work so I can achieve those things and I don't put my kids to bed, they tell me I'm stealing time. And, I've been doing a little bit of that lately. And I noticed that yesterday, that's what, what came up for me was how, I was sort of removing myself. And that's what I needed to clear away. And I'm so grateful that there was a window of willingness. When I had my rock bottom and I was at home, my parents were actually away. And I was having a terrible time. I was calling them, they were away. They sent a member of Alcoholics Anonymous around actually just to check on me. And they got back and I sat down across the dining room table and told them everything that was going on. I've been living a double life. I was the head girl of my school. That's what they were proud of. I was on stage. I played 6 musical instruments. I aced science. I was a good kid in their eyes. And I went off to university. And I didn't like lining up in the nightclub. I wanted to be on the VIP list. So I started dating the guy who owned the biggest club in the UK at the time. Of course. What else are you going to do? So by day, I'm trying to pretend to be, the captain of the school still. And by night, I'm up partying all night with the underbelly of the Liverpool nightclub scene, I was living a double life. But we're stretched thin. We cannot do that. I'm an incredibly sensitive person. I cannot do that. If I'm not in honesty, I have nothing. And when I sat down from the table and I told them what had been going on, my mum went white and walked out the room. This was the third one. Dad, husband, daughter. And my dad sat opposite me and he just very calmly said, "What do you want to do?" And I went, I suppose I better go to one of your meetings then. There was a tiny fraction of honesty, open-mindedness and willingness, And yesterday when I walked into this room and I had that realisation of something that I needed to get off my chest, I had a fraction of honesty, open-mindedness and willingness. The tools that got me in here are still the same tools that I need to use to stay sober today. And, the more I stick around, the more I desperately need this program, because I forget that I would need to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. I'm a very forgetful person. I love the part in A Vision for You, the last words of our big book that say, abandon yourself to God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We'll be with you. We'll be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you. And I love that. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.